Carl Jung mapped 8 markers for an extraordinarily rare temperament. And if you recognize even half of these traits, you're part of what I call the psychological elite. In decades of study, Jung revealed that fewer than 5% of people develop what he called differentiated consciousness, a way of experiencing reality so rich, so nuanced that most minds barely scratch the surface. Yet here's what's truly fascinating. These rare individuals often spend lifetimes feeling that something is wrong with them, when in fact they're carrying a hidden asset. Jung documented countless stories of people with astonishing psychological depth, who were told by society that their intensity, their sensitivity, and their refusal to settle for surface answers were flaws rather than signals of extraordinary mental sophistication. The twist he uncovered is even more remarkable. These rare personalities aren't merely different. They're evolutionarily advanced. They represent the next stage in humanity's consciousness development. Join me as we descend into the depths of Jungian psychology to uncover these 8 definitive signs of rare personality types. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, everything you've been told about being too much will finally click into place, because you're not too much for the world. The world is too small for you. Jung's insight, often overlooked in modern psychology, is that the traits that make you feel like an outsider aren't defects. They're upgrades. You're not broken. You're on the brink of breakthrough. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what if who you truly are doesn't fit society's narrow definitions of normal? What if your intensity, your depth, and your refusal to settle for superficial answers are evidence of what I call advanced psychological architecture? Think of it this way, from an evolutionary perspective. The people who propelled humanity forward didn't accept the status quo. They asked more questions, felt more deeply, and imagined possibilities others couldn't even conceive. The tragedy is that society often teaches these extraordinary individuals to suppress their strengths, to shrink their light so others won't feel unsettled. The result is a lifetime of feeling too much in a world that insists on being enough. What's even more astonishing is that Jung's work and modern neuroscience are beginning to align. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people shows that roughly 20% of the population processes sensory information more deeply. But Jung identified something rarer still: individuals whose entire psychological architecture operates at an advanced, subtler level. And the most heartbreaking part is this: these rare souls frequently hide their gifts because they've learned to interpret them as burdens. You've learned to dim your light because it threatens others. Let me illuminate the first sign of what I call psychological rarity. Sign 1. You experience emotional depth that feels almost supernatural. Jung noted that emotional intensity isn't merely a surge of feeling. For some, it's a resonance that moves through the psyche, like an orchestra of meaning. These aren't merely bouts of moodiness or instability. They are the channels through which the objective psyche, the layers of human experience most people suppress, reaches us. When you feel deeply, you aren't overreacting. You're accessing a higher layer of consciousness. You can sense the unspoken tension in a room before a single word is spoken. You carry the undercurrents of every interaction as if your nervous system were tuned to a deeper spectrum of reality. And yet you've learned to regulate this depth, because without that regulation, you exhaust yourself and others. You're not broken by emotion. You're trained to translate emotion into meaning that others can't even glimpse. As Jung observed, every irritant about others can illuminate paths to self-understanding if you're willing to read the map in your own interior. Sign 2. You question reality with sacred curiosity. Where most people glide through life on automatic pilot, you refuse to take surface explanations at face value. In Jung's terms, you're wielding an active thinking function that refuses to settle for easy answers. You don't just ask what your questions demand why. Why do relationships that diminish us persist? Why do systems that hinder human flourishing endure? Why do meaningful conversations sometimes feel hollow? This is the transcendent function in action. The ability to imagine beyond present constraints and to sense what could be more authentic, more aligned with the full spectrum of human potential. But your questions aren't neutral. They unsettle the status quo. They threaten comfortable illusions. If you've ever been told you ask too many questions or think too deeply, hold your head high and remind yourself, sacred curiosity is a spiritual practice with teeth. Sign 3. You've developed conscious independence. Jung warned against the illusion of wholeness that comes from pleasing others. Instead, you've embraced a harder, more liberating path. Individuation, the psychological journey toward becoming a whole self. Your independence isn't a fortress built to ward off others. It's a fortress built to protect your own essence. You learned often through hardship to stand on your own and craft an identity that can't be stripped away by someone else's opinion or absence. The shadow you faced is real, the parts of you were told to reject. Yet you've begun to integrate them, not to fit into a crowd, but to stand as a beacon of authenticity. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's sanctuary, the place where you remember who you are, beneath all the roles and expectations. And you know that true psychological health rests on that self-knowledge. Sign 4. You possess what I call hyperactive awareness. Jung recognized intuition as a legitimate function, and you've made it your main instrument. You don't just notice people. You read their psychological signatures, the micro-expressions they guard, the energy shifts. They attempt to hide the words they don't quite say. This is not paranoia. It's a finely tuned perception that reaches beyond the obvious. You access the process of active imagination, perceiving the hidden structures of reality that others miss. When a person says they're fine, but their energy screams distress, you feel the truth in your bones. In rooms thick with unspoken tension, you're the one who sees what others refuse to acknowledge. But Jung cautioned that such sensitivity must be guarded. Without boundaries, you exhaust your vitality by becoming an unrequested therapist for everyone around you. Your gift demands care, discipline, and a rhythm that preserves your own energy. Sign 5. You crave meaning above all else. The psyche, when aligned with truth, refuses to pretend. You've tried to live for external validation, chasing popularity, chasing scripts. But the deeper you listen, the more you hear a call that won't be silenced. The emptiness of empty accomplishments becomes intolerable. Neurological and existential indicators alike point to the same truth. Meaning matters more than the praise of crowds. When you live out of alignment with your authentic nature, you don't merely feel uneasy. You manifest neurotic symptoms, the body and mind signaling that you're wired for more substantial things. Those who prioritize meaning become evolutionary catalysts for human consciousness. By refusing to settle for superficial connection, You become a living critique of inauthentic living, forcing others to confront their own compromises and gravities toward genuine purpose. Sign 6. You outgrow people and environments repeatedly. Jung warned that the greatest tragedy often lies in the unlived possibilities of the parents. You experience the same through your own life. Growth for you tends to be solitary, an arduous but transformative journey that can leave former companions behind. As you shed conditioning that no longer serves you, the people who once knew you may struggle to recognize you. This isn't coldness, it's evolution in action. Once you catch a glimpse of the broader terrain of your own potential, you can't pretend you didn't see it. Jung called this psychological death and rebirth, the recurring shedding of old skins to reveal a more authentic self. The friends who beg you to return to who you were may be offering a chance to shrink back to safety. Your response is to keep choosing ascent. If you're told to go back, tell them my evolution is not negotiable. Sign 7. You create what I call transformational presence. Jung described the rare trait of holding space, the ability to let another's truth emerge in your presence, without rushing to fix or judge. When you show up, people feel seen in a way that's almost magical. You don't broadcast empathy. You embody a kind of psychological holding a space where truth can finally surface. Yet this gift can be exhausting if you give it away too freely. You're prone to helper syndrome, a pattern where your generosity becomes self-sacrificing, leaving you depleted while others rely on your energy. The work isn't to stop caring. It's to cultivate discernment, knowing when to offer presence, and when to preserve your own need for care. You become a living laboratory of healing, not a perpetual resource for others' healing. Sign 8. You sense a purpose that can't yet be defined. Jung urged that your vision becomes clear. When you look inward, looking outside breeds dreams. Looking inside awakens them. If you carry a persistent sense that you're meant for something more than the ordinary, you're hearing the transcendent function at work, your psyche's instinct to move toward individuation and purpose. The pull isn't about fame or outward recognition. It's about alignment with your deepest law of being. You may not see the entire map yet, but you know you're not done. When you ignore this call, you invite anxiety, depression, or a creeping sense of meaninglessness. The grand insight is that your calling isn't purely personal. It's transpersonal, an invitation to contribute to the evolution of consciousness itself. Jung studied these traits in people he called differentiated individuals, the rare ones whose psychological complexity allows them to see, feel, and understand at depths others can't reach. He also mapped stages of development to help you navigate growth. Stage 1. The unconscious outsider. You feel different. You don't yet understand why. You try to blend in to appear normal, but the strain is immense. Persona rigidity takes root as you posture for acceptance, and you lose touch with the authentic you. Stage 2. The awakening individual. You begin to recognize your traits as potential gifts rather than problems. You start practicing shadow integration, owning the parts you've learned to reject. You stop apologizing for your depth and begin setting firm boundaries with those who want you to dim your light. You seek allies who can match your level of authenticity. Stage 3. The individuated consciousness. You have assimilated your rare traits into a coherent identity and live with purpose that you actively choose every day. you become a beacon for other rare souls, not merely living truth, but enabling others to live theirs as well. You may be ready to declare, "I am psychologically rare and proud," but Jung warned of a crucial truth. You must integrate your shadow, or your gifts risk becoming their prison. What do we mean by this? Several shadow patterns recur among psychologically advanced individuals. The superiority complex, a tendency to see rarity as superiority rather than difference. The messianic shadow, you feel it's your mission to awaken everyone, which can breed burnout and resentment when others resist your urgency. The martyrdom shadow, you believe your depth requires suffering, a belief that drains happiness and real connection. Shadow integration isn't about erasing these tendencies. It's about making them conscious so they no longer drive your behavior unconsciously. True psychological rarity includes the wisdom to decide when to share your gifts and when to hold them close, when to lead and when to follow, when to speak truth and when to remain silent. Jung observed that rare personalities influence relationships in two dominant ways. They attract those who want to possess their light, and they threaten those who feel their own light dimmed by it. The light seekers are drawn to your energy but aren't ready to walk their own path. They want you to be their therapist or guru. The light dimmer fears your intensity and tries to pull you back toward familiar ground. The light matcher consists of the rare individuals who have done their inner work and can meet you at your depth, honoring your sovereignty while sharing your commitment to truth. The goal is psychological discrimination, the ability to discern who can form an authentic relationship with you, and who is simply seeking you as a mirror or a remedy. With psychological rarity comes responsibility. You're not just different for your own sake. You're different in service of human evolution. Those with rare traits serve as bridges between the unconscious and conscious realms of experience. Through your depth, your questions, your refusal to accept shallow answers, you help humanity grow. That's why you can never settle for ordinary. Surface-level connection feels hollow, because your psyche knows there is more to life than being okay. The loneliness you sometimes experience is the price of moving ahead of the crowd. You're solving problems that most people can't even name, and you're seeking connections that many can't conceive. Jung warned about psychological inflation, the peril of believing you are superior simply because you're rare. The antidote is humility married to power. Wield your gifts with responsibility, not bravado. Your sensitivity isn't a flaw to mend. It's an intelligence to apply. Your intensity isn't excessive. It's precisely what certain situations demand. Your refusal to settle isn't stubbornness. It's a commitment to progress. Jung spent his life studying people like you because he understood an extraordinary truth. You aren't just living your life. You're expanding what it means to be human. The world doesn't need you to shrink to quiet down or to become more convenient. It needs you to embody exactly what you are psychologically rare and profoundly unapologetic about it. If you're ready to fully embrace your psychological rarity and stop apologizing for traits that make you extraordinary, drop a comment below. I am evolutionary consciousness in human form. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own psychological rarity. And if you want to dive deeper into Jung's insights about the shadow side of sensitivity, check out my video on the final warning. To empaths, the one that reveals Jung's most unsettling discovery about how unconscious people drain the energy of psychologically advanced individuals. Subscribe, because we're just beginning to explore the depths of what makes you extraordinary. Remember, you're not too much. The world is too little. Jung knew that people like you are the ones who change that. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.